Our scripture this morning comes from the Gospel according to Mark, the 3rd chapter, beginning at the 20th verse. Then Jesus went home, and the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard of it, they went out to restrain him, for people were saying, "He's gone out of his mind." And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, "He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of demons he casts out demons." And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. "How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, the kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end is come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man, and then indeed the house can be plundered." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
A house divided against itself cannot stand. Abraham Lincoln quoted those words at the Republican State Convention in Illinois in 1858. And he went on to be very clear that what he wanted was for our national house to cease its divisions. We were on the brink of civil war. And he wanted the nation to stand. He went on to say, "I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall. But I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other." Now, different from Lincoln, Jesus does expect the house to fall. And he intends to make that happen. You know, the scribes seem to have sort of appointed themselves as the chief critics of Jesus. And here they are again, this time criticizing Jesus for casting out demons. He must be the prince of demons himself. He's using Satan's power. Jesus has a rather common sense rebuttal to that accusation. If a house is divided against itself, it cannot stand. But then he goes on to talk about entering the house, tying up the owner, and looting what's inside. His actions make it clear that he is seeking to destroy that house and its owner. There's a New Testament scholar by the name of Ched Myers who's written a commentary on Mark's Gospel, which he entitles "Binding the Strong Man." And it's clear for him that this piece I just read to you is the central image by which we understand Jesus' ministry. It's an intriguing idea. And why does Myers think that? And what is it he's trying to say? Well, he has subtitled his book, "A Political Reading of Mark's Story." And while I don't agree with everything that Myers says, he clearly disagrees with those who think we need to keep the gospel spiritual and want it to have nothing to do with politics. What Myers makes clear are all the ways in which Jesus so enraged the powers of his own day that they killed him. You know, in this day and age, we tend to make Jesus this really nice guy, and it's hard to understand why anybody would take offense at him, let alone string him up. And notice the action of the folk in the short piece I just read. Jesus' family thinks he's gone nuts. And the scribes think he's a representative of the devil. So, what's going on? Well, first, I think Myers is right in his understanding that Jesus is out to destroy a lot of the social and political expectations by which people live. You know, we've kind of bought into this idea that Jesus' kingdom is not of the world. And in doing it, we overlook just how much it really does impact this world. Particularly, Jesus hits at the small and local level where life is really lived. He confronts the folk who control the ins and outs of daily life. That's the scribes. And it was their job to interpret the Torah and tell folk just what, you can do this, but you can't do that. There was the sacrificial system of the temple. It's foreign to us, but it was very important to people of Jesus' days. And there were all the religious observances that give life rhythm and meaning. We have those today. We just had Memorial Day. It helps to focus our life in a particular way. Well, even the things that we want to interpret as Jesus' private acts of mercy begin to take on political overtones. He heals on the Sabbath. Oh, you don't do that. He touches people who shouldn't be touched. He includes people who should not be included. There's a kind of in-your-face quality to it. Jesus' style is not that, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but I did it. And now, what are you going to do about it? Is Jesus one of those people who likes to just tear things apart to see what kind of result he gets? You know, I once served on a committee with a man who used to throw verbal bombs into the midst of the meeting and then kind of sit back and watch the havoc that he created. He could disrupt the tamest meeting and just throw everybody into a tizzy. Is Jesus like that? Or is there something deeper at work? Jesus, why do you do this? It's only going to get you in trouble. Why do it? Well, it has to do with the nature of the strong man, doesn't it? And even more, it has to do with the identity of the strong man. Who is he? Who is this strong man? See, what Jesus knows is that at the heart of the universe, there is a power which is dark and malevolent. And it manifests itself in the ways that are destructive of human life. It divides and destroys and limits and confuses. And some of its evidence is easy to identify, especially when we have some distance from it. You know, think about the Crusaders who slaughtered their way across Eastern Europe and Asia Minor in order to save the Holy Land from the infidel. We see that happening in another religious faith and forget that we did it too. Truly awful things done in the name of Christ. And it's easy for any of us to say, well, that's not Christian. And it isn't. But is it so easy to see those wrongs where they are in our world today? I mean, I'm sure most of the Crusaders thought they were doing noble things. You know, Paul warns the Corinthians, even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. There's truth in that. And sometimes we can identify evil so easily, like the horror of the Holocaust. But other times it's not so easy to see. You know, we're very good in this country at ignoring the way we treated the Native Americans who stood in the way of our country's settlement. So how do we identify the forms taken by this destructive power? That's the hard part. And you know, most of us have seen enough of what it means to point fingers at people that we are very rightly averse to doing that. We don't want to say, this is evil, and even more we don't want to say, you're evil. Nevertheless, you can't fight something you won't even name. And sometimes I think that all our good, tolerant stuff is part of the cloak of invisibility that evil throws around itself for protection. How then do we identify the works of the strong man that needs to be bound? First, they're destructive. They destroy the minds and families and communities of people who are bound by them. We see that happen in drug-riddled communities, but there are other drugs. Success and power can be their own demons if they indeed isolate us from the larger and needier world. And if we turn to the world of nature, then the ecologists have opened our eyes to another form of destruction. We do it in the name of progress and profit. But does that make it right? Second, evil speaks with a lying tongue. At one point, Jesus even calls Satan the father of lies. You know, the demons take things out of context and make them seem like truth. They let us hear what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. They keep us from examining our own lives. They hide evil under explanation and justification. But above all, the strong man is opposed to God. And that's why it's destructive and lying, whether in politics or business or social life or nature or even within our own souls. And everything Jesus does is aimed at disrupting that power and opening the way for God. Jesus' intention is to enter the house of that evil power and strip it bare. It will cost him dearly. And if we were to ask him, why do you do that? He would answer, because I love you, and I want you to be free. I want the strong man bound, not you. Thanks be to God.